Hi, and welcome to another episode of pianoTV. So today's video is the second part of a two-parter series on how dotted notes work. So if you missed the first video on dotted notes, definitely check it out. I'll link it on the screen so you can do that. Now this video covers a couple of the more complicated dots. So that would be the dotted eighth note and the dotted 16th note. So let's do this thing. So just a quick refresher on dots. The dot is adding half of the note's value to itself. So in this case, we have an eighth note, and an eighth note is worth half a beat. So half of half a beat is a quarter of a beat. So this dotted eighth note actually gets 3/4 of a beat. And that's why you often see the dotted eighth note paired with a 16th note, because a 16th note gets a quarter of a beat. And that completes our 3/4. So when you put both of these two notes together, it equals 1 beat, which is simple to count, and that's how it usually appears on the page. So in order to count this example out, we have to look at the different types of notes. So this example has 16th notes, which means we're not going to be counting just 1, 2, 3, or 1 and 2 and, which is an eighth note subdivision. We're going to count 1 E and A, because that's a 16th note subdivision. Because when there are 16th notes on the page, you really want to count at the 16th note subdivision, because then you don't have this random notes floating in outer space without a count underneath them. If every single note's accounted for, it's really difficult to make mistakes. So let's start though by figuring out where beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 go. So we know that this dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats, and this completes it. So these two together get 2 beats. So the first beat's going to be here, the second one's going to be around here. Now this is going to start the third beat, and as we just learned, a dotted eighth note and a 16th note equal 1 beat when they're put together, and this gets the fourth beat. So let's do the same thing with this next part. Here we have the reverse, so we have the 16th note and the dotted eighth note get the first beat. This quarter note gets the second beat, and again, this is reversed from the first bar. This is going to be the start of beat 3, and then beat 4 is going to kick in around somewhere in the middle. So now let's fill in the ands and do the eighth note subdivision. So 1 and 2, and. Now this is a little bit different, so I'm going to just leave that until we're counting 3 E and A just for a second here. So 2 and 3 and 4 and for that last one, because this is basically worth 3/8 beats. So there's 1, 2, 3/8 beats. All right, so now let's subdivide this even further. So counting in 16th notes, so 3 E and A. So all of this together is going to equal 3 E and A. This is going to be the A, because it just gets that very last 16th beat. So 3 E and is that dotted eighth note. So if we just fill in the blanks, 1 E and A, 2 E and A, etc., 3 E and A, 4 E and A, so on. Let's jump over here. So now we have the 16th note at the beginning. So that's going to just be the very start of the beat, so 1. And this one is going to get the remaining 3 16th beats, E and A, and so on. So if I was going to clap this example just so you can hear it, I'll count 1 E and A, 2 E and A throughout the whole thing, just so that it's not confusing. Because if you switch back and forth between counting like 1 E and A, 2 and, it's easy to mess up the beat or count at the wrong speed. So let's do this here. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A, 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. So let's quickly try out one more example together. Same idea, we have 16th notes, so we're going to count in a 16th subdivision. So starting here, 1 E and A, because that's 1 beat, 2 E and A, and so just work with me here. This looks like a gibberish language here. As long as you know where beats 1, 2, and 3 E and A are. So when we're counting this one, remember this gets 3 16th notes. So this would get 1 E and. And this is the final 16th note over here, so this gets A. All right, so I'm gonna clap out this example for you without writing it all in, because I think you can follow along. So 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A. Same thing, 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 1 E and A, 2 E, 3 E and A. And you're allowed to breathe. I couldn't quite make it through that whole thing without taking a breath. All right, let's take a quick look at this wild and exciting dotted 16th note. It's very rare. You're probably not going to see it unless you're doing like, a Beethoven sonata or something. But on the off chance you come across it, it's good to know what to do with it. So as we know, a 16th note by itself gets a quarter of a beat. And the dot adds half of that. So half of a quarter is an eighth. So the easiest way to think about the dotted 16th note is that it gets 3/8, so 3/8 beats. Now, it's usually paired with a 30-second note. And yes, 30-second notes do exist. They're twice as fast as 16th notes, so they get 1/8 of a beat. So if this one gets 3/8 of a beat, and this one gets 1/8 of a beat, if you add them together, you get 4/8, which, if basic math has taught me anything, would divide into half a beat. So when you put these two notes together they equal an eighth note, or an eighth beat. All right, so here's our full example. I kind of just took this off a Debussy piece. So there's no time signature here because it's just a snippet, but it's in this time signature of 2/4. So let's work this out. Okay, so we know that the dotted 16th note paired with the 32nd note equals an eighth beat. So if we're gonna break this down, this would get 1 and 2 and. You see how that works? Because that is like basically, it's a lot more complicated. It looks more complicated, but this altogether basically just equals an eighth beat. On and on. All right, so I don't like to further subdivide music beyond 1E because then we're just getting too crazy. So this gets 3/8 of a beat. So 1E will be here, and this one's gonna float somewhere in between the E and the N. Just work with me here, and we'll figure this out. And same thing here. The A is gonna come here, and then this is just gonna float like slightly after 2E and A. And then this kind of floats after the A. So I'm gonna clap that for you so you can kind of hear what that sounds like here. 1E and 2E and you kind of see how that works? It's got that same rhythm that any dotted note has paired with a shorter note. So not as bad as it looks. And that concludes our quick and fairly simple and straightforward dotted note series. So hopefully you feel armed and equipped to deal with any dots that might get in your way. Yeah, that's my cat. Scratch, 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 wrecking the furniture, being a cat. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you next time. That's how I pump myself up to make a video. Do a little dance. Serious face.